Welcome to the SBI podcast. You are joining the most watched and listened to show dedicated to B2B revenue growth. I'm Melissa. Our guest today is Stephen Mohan, SVP of North American Sales for XPO Logistics. Stephen has led several enterprise sales forces and is the perfect guest to discuss how to execute in the enterprise. Enjoy. From SBI's Executive Briefing Center in Dallas, Texas, the most watched and listened to content in B2B sales and marketing, it's the SBI podcast with your host, Matt Shares.
Welcome to the SBI podcast, a weekly show dedicated to helping you make your number. Today, we're going to demonstrate how to execute in the enterprise. And when I talk about enterprise, I mean large-scale, multi-billion-dollar organizations. My name is Matt Shares. I'm the CEO of SBI. I'm also your host. Joining me in the studio today is Stephen Mohan. Stephen is the Senior Vice President of North American Sales for XPO Logistics. So Stephen, welcome to the show. Pleasure to have you here. Introduce yourself and maybe tell our viewers and listeners a little bit about XPO.
Sure. Thank you, Matt. Appreciate that. As Matt mentioned, my name is Stephen Mohan, Senior Vice President of North American Sales for XPO Logistics. XPO Logistics is the leading transportation and supply chain company in the United States. So we specialize in helping customers solve very complex transportation needs.
Got it. So if I was, Joe or Jill average,
right,
and what would be sort of a day-to-day thing that I would think about that XPO would do, or where would I be bumping into XPO most common?
Matt, we're a very dynamic company, and so it's a very broad question there. So everything from as consumers become more comfortable buying even larger and larger purchases online, XPO's there and partners with many of those online retailers to actually deliver product over the threshold into the home and install. On the other side of the equation, on the B2B side, getting raw materials from point A to point B.
Perfect.
So solving transportation needs is what we do.
All right, so also joining me is my co-host, Melissa Valdez. So Melissa's here to point you to resources to advance you along the way to making your number. Mel V, wonderful to see you again.
Thank you, Matt, and welcome, Stephen. Glad to have you here. Welcome to our audience. If you'd like to follow along today, Matt and Stephen will be leveraging the How to Make Your Number in 2018 workbook. They will visit the sales strategy section, organizational design on page 364. And to get this fabulous workbook, you will go to sbi.tips/2018 workbook.
And before we get into the show, I believe this is a first, and there's two reasons why this is a first. Normally, the best hair on this show, Melissa, is typically you. But because
clearly
we have Governor...
I see where this is going.
Because we have Governor Mohan. I mean, as I sit here as a man who has not had hair,
Matt, that was what I was going to say. The only one I'll claim to have better hair than is you.
I mean,
outside of that, I will go any further.
Dude, I got awesome scalp, but your hair, I mean, Mitt Romney, you got nothing on my man right here. So Stephen's got the best hair in the enterprise, and he actually might have the best hair in Dallas.
Later on, we will talk about which products.
Yes, and apparently I'll just be leaving.
That is also a three-tiered approach, and I don't think we have time to get into it. And I'm sure that's not where your audience tuned in to listen to.
And I'll be leaving the room at that portion. So all right, all kidding aside. So Stephen, when executing in the enterprise, structure and size of the sales force, huge priority, huge issue, otherwise known as feet on the street. And many of your peers struggle because, a company like XPO that's, billions of dollars in revenue. So I guess maybe start at an altitude relative to how do you think about feet on the street and this concept of coverage?
Sure. It is a really important question, and all too often we don't put enough thought into it. We just naturally begin, well, I should have some sales reps, and then and as problems evolve in your coverage model, typically you solve it by, well, let's put some more salespeople here, or let's put salespeople who specialize in that, and before you know it, you have this organization that doesn't align with your segmentation strategy. And so that would be my answer, Matt. My answer would be, starting with a really good segmentation strategy and understanding that intimately and how those customers go to market and how those customers buy, and then beginning to build your sales force around that. And I think that's a good place to start.
Segmentation first, role design second.
Absolutely.
So many folks, in your and you've been in multiple enterprise companies,
sure.
So you know what big looks like, and you've seen this, and you've also executed transformations in the Fortune 500 in multiple companies. Walk in the door, first 90 days. I'm listening or watching this show right now. Your advice is, hey, Mr. or Mrs. Head of Sales, start with segmentation.
Yes.
Got it. When you think about segmentation, and for those that are watching or listening, and I'll give Stephen a plug here, the concept of doing it once is great. You've got to get that done. But the concept of refreshing it and keeping it dynamic as the market changes, as you launch new products, as you call on new customers, there's got to be an in-year cadence to updating that segmentation. So Stephen, if that's at the account level, then talk to me about buyers. How do you determine which buyers want to buy where through which reps and or partners? Like, how do you generate levels of insights to help you with that piece?
Great question. So I'm going to get to that. I'm going to take a half step backwards if you don't mind.
Please.
Because I think the value add to the audience as I'm listening, as I've thought about this,
yep.
and you typically walk in and you don't have a blank canvas. You're walking into something that already exists. So
very true.
That's a fantastic idea, Stephen. Let's start with segmentation. The reality is this has been going on for 25, 30 years, and
yep.
I'm inheriting this kind of organizational design.
Very true.
Then the question to the leader is, what do you do?
Very true.
And so even at large organizations,
yep.
where the at least assumption is that you have incredible numbers of resources and time and money available at your disposal, it's typically myth. It's typically a myth. You typically don't. And so my advice to the audience listening, walking into that, would be as simplistic, one bite at a time. Start with
yep.
your most important segment, start there, organize that, and slowly trickle down.
That's good.
Would be something good. Now,
yep.
getting back to your question, which was a good one, around how do you gain that buyer insight? How do you know,
yep.
right, in a dynamic way what
yep.
your customers want to buy and how they want to buy? And I think a very novel answer to that
yep.
is ask them.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
And it's amazing how in today's world that enterprise selling buzzwords like customer centricity get
yep.
thrown out, and having a very customer centric approach and being all about the customer. And I think that's really important. And if I'm being transparent, we're on that journey as well.
Yeah.
I don't think we have the magic unlock that figured
yep.
it out. But what I do think is incredibly important is finding a methodology or a process
yep.
that can be repeatable,
yep.
that you continually get buyer insight asked in, whether that's through survey, whether that's through firms like yourself helping
right.
that out, or whether that's through even just tasking the sales organization to do through their QBR, their quarterly business review process,
yeah.
to get insight from the actual buyers,
yep.
how they like to buy.
So what Stephen just mentioned, and he gave 3 or 4 ways to do it. My answer would be all of the above. Those are all inputs, how to determine it. Mm-hmm. And I think the exclamation point I would put is mapping the customer journey and then understanding the touch points, right? This concept of points of leverage. And how is it that they want to buy? Can I engage with you via GoToMeeting? Right. And I actually don't want to see a salesperson because it's adding friction
yeah.
to the sales process, because I'm comfortable in 2018
yeah. buying
something that's very transactional, that I know I need, and I'm an educated buyer.
Right.
So feet on the street is bad.
Right.
Versus something that's much more complex, and I need not only a subject matter expert, but the salesperson, somebody from finance. So I agree with you on that. So then it brings me to my next question. The big debate in enterprise organizations always is org model. Mm-hmm. So when you think about classic org design, you think about hunter-farmer. You think about, the classic pyramid of enterprise, mid-market, SMB. Sure. Do I have product specialists? Do I have industry specialists? Do I specialize by buyer role, right? So how do you unpack org design and the 7 classic org models? How do you think through that?
That's also a really important question when you think about driving effectiveness through an entire sales organization.
Yep.
And most organizations end up having some type of hybrid model.
Yep.
But I think the ability to step back and think through, as you alluded to in your question, is that really, right, the most effective way to go to market?
Yep.
And taking into account not simply just the customer interaction, which we spent time talking about, like how buyers want to buy,
yep.
and organizing it around that, but this concept that's becoming more and more talked about, and I think it's necessary, this idea of internal seller burden as well. So it's certainly the customer. You want to be customer-centric, and you want to be able, to your point, when we did this model, we actually found, Matt, an entire segment of our customers that said, we value you, we appreciate your service, but we don't need to see you. And yet I had a coverage model that was covering those people. In fact, right, hard-charging sales professionals saying, see this customer 4 times a year, and had some type of process by how many touch points I wanted to have with this customer. They said, listen, your service is just fine, with the exception of, I don't need to see you as often. And so that's one side of the equation, Matt. The other side of the equation, though, and I think it's almost as important, probably not as much, but almost as important, is this idea of reducing seller burden. If you think about the burden that we put on our sellers today, as product complexity continues to increase, as everybody's trying to differentiate, the buying process within our customers at the enterprise level is getting more complex, as you have to talk and sell across many different functions. And then the internal touch points, meaning what does it take to get a complex solution for a customer priced out? How many people do I have to talk? How many people do I have to influence? How many internal systems do I have to touch? And so thinking about a org design that does both of those things, I think is one of the most effective. How do you touch more of your ideal customers in an effective way while reducing,
internal
seller burden?
I love that term.
And driving new customer acquisitions.
You know, the concept around internal seller burden oftentimes can be captured in, your classic time and motion study, right? And as a benchmarking firm, every year, that sort of 73 to 78% of, if I'm an account executive or a hunter salesperson, I want to be spending that time in my core buckets of prepping for a sales call, executing the sales call, and post-sales call follow-up. What we always end up seeing is it's somewhere in the 40s. And a lot of friction, and I've never heard that term internal seller burden, but that is a great org design principle that isn't always factored. And it's probably a topic for a different show relative to what does it take to get a deal done, because internal approvals have gotten crazy.
Absolutely.
All right, so Stephen and I are going to take a quick break from the interview. Melissa's going to share a tool that all of you can leverage. So Mel V, what do you have for the audience?
So you're probably wondering if you are going to make your number this year. Well, fortunately, SBI has built an interactive web-based self-assessment just for you. You can find this fabulous tool at sbi.tips/revenue growth diagnostic. Spend a few minutes there in the sales strategy section and see how your go-to-market strategy measures up to those emerging best practices of market leaders.
All right, this is the SBI Podcast. I'm your host, Matt Shares, and today's guest is Stephen Mohan. Stephen is the Senior Vice President of North American Sales for XPO Logistics. Today, Stephen and I are demonstrating how to execute in the enterprise, and we're spending quite a bit of time on this concept of org design and roles and coverage. So we're going to stay on that, and in this segment, we're going to dive another layer deeper and talk about where to draw the line for inside sales. So, Stephen, we were talking about sort of the classic structure. I agree with your assertion. Most companies are a hybrid. And as you know, I'm very vocal about this, that companies that pick an org design outperform companies who have a hybrid. So those that go in all in on hunter-farmer or go in on product specialization or go all in on stratification, as opposed to a little bit of kind of the twister, they always outperform in revenue per head. That being said, when you're in the process of determining the types of roles and asking the inside versus outside question, talk a little bit about how you've done that, because you have stood up one of the largest inside sales teams in a previous life, and you're bringing some of that great knowledge into XPO. So advice and feedback for our audience.
Sure, I think similar to many of the topics that we've talked about today, the idea of inside sales or an inside selling organization has evolved dramatically over the last decade. Right, sure, particularly over the last 5 to 7 years. And the concept of what inside sales can do and can accomplish is dramatically different.
Agreed.
Inside sales organizations today are far more agile, far more skilled, far more technologically advanced. That the type of technology we can put into these inside sales organizations is really driving a high level of effectiveness. And so what we think about when we look at the difference between kind of inside sales versus outside sales and how do we use that, we don't think about it in a monolithic way. We think about it this way. We think about how can I most effectively drive and develop new leads, how can I most effectively, touch customers in there? So as we talked earlier in the first segment about customer segmentation model and understanding how buyers like to buy, you'll find a unique set of customers that actually want to buy this way, and putting them in that bucket. And then also thinking about how do I continually have that that cost-effective way. So I'm not. We think about it like this. I want to be able to put the right sales professional in front of the right customer at the right time. And when I think about it that way, inside sales begins to be a vehicle that fits a large portion of the selling organization. So it's really that kind of thought process that we think about. But again, it's done in an agile way, meaning it's not a one-size-fits-all model. In the inside sales models that we've stood up, many portions of that org do different things and have different tasks.
Okay, so you went exactly where I want to go. So I'm listening to this show, I'm saying, okay, yeah, Stephen, I've got 62 people in inside sales, I've got 400 on the outside, I'm organized by enterprise, mid-market, SMB, my inside guys go to SMB, my core up and down the street guys do middle market, and I've got my strategic account team. Check, I'm good. And I know you would say, time out, no, you're not, because the inside team should have a level of stratification and a level of granularity, just like the outside team should have. So talk a little bit about like that sub-segmentation and the different roles in the inside team, including, you talked about, hey, some level of lead development, so whether it's a business development rep or a sales development rep.
Absolutely.
Talk about how you've rationalized that with hundreds and thousands of sellers under your purview.
Yeah, so the segmentation model that you do starts at the top all the way down and through. So we don't delineate between, okay, let's have a different segmentation model for inside sales. It's a part of it. But then you can be more thoughtful and intentional. So the types of roles that we put in there, I mentioned agility, and yes, we have business development reps that are going out and calling on and beginning to cover a large segment of our customer base that we don't know, that we don't touch, that we haven't met yet, but we're eager to learn about them.
Got it.
And so we have a group.
And that's an output of the segmentation, because then you said I've got 97 prospects that look, smell, sound, and feel like my ideal customer, but I'm doing nothing with them. Let me give them to a BDR, and that's his or her mission in life. Okay, awesome. And then there might be somebody who's a pure quoted inside rep that you've got?
Yes, and then so we have part of our model that fits well. There's a part of our org design that is a more transactional based opportunity. Our customers have told us that their number one thing that they want in that model is ease and availability, and then of course price value. That equation comes in, and it's a top 3 for this kind of customer segment. So how do we make it easy for customers to buy, and how do we drive availability? One of the best ways to drive availability is having an inside sales force that's constantly there.
Love it.
And I think that's an important piece that we think about.
So if you're listening or watching this show, a takeaway is the way that Stephen rattled off ease, availability being the first 2 items, that a segment of his customers and how he is now servicing those customers is through inside sales. That's understanding how to create a frictionless process. And you should be asking yourself, do I have a frictionless process? Not only a buying process to prosecute a new opportunity, but a frictionless process to service a customer and create this wonderful client experience. So Stephen, last question in this segment. You talked about inside sales, the agility of it, the maturity of it, the growth of it. Buyers are changing what they want and how they expect it. So let's go all the way up into bigger sort of enterprise accounts, strategic accounts. Are you dabbling with and looking at an inside sales coverage model for your most strategic accounts? Because I will tell you, many of your peers say, gee, if you're a top 20% account and you spend all this money with me, I got to put all these people. And all these people mean airplanes and flying to City X and QBRs. What's your point of view on that?
Yeah, no, I think that's fantastic. And I'm not sure it's all the way completely evolved yet, but here's how we're thinking about it, and here's how we're attacking it slightly differently than maybe the average. So we're doing a support mechanism within a strategic account. So yes, today, we are segmentation at our top, say, 1,000 customers. We use a face-to-face generalist model. So we have a geographic-based face-to-face generalist that sells across industry verticals.
So they're horizontal in terms of breadth. They're looking at the entire opportunity inside an account.
And then we overlay that with what I call, traditionally, over support. Right? Because sometimes support, you go, it's a finance model, it's like, okay, that's a 6-to-1 ratio, I can afford some level of sales support, but every 6-1 gets 1.
Yeah.
And there's really no intentionality. It's trying to reduce some of that admin work, so the idea philosophically aligns perfectly. How do I put my typically a high-priced resource and a skilled seller in front of more customers rather than doing back office stuff?
Amen.
We've elevated that, and we've actually changed that model to say they have dedicated support. So it's typically in about a 2-to-1 ratio. So they're actually part of that account team driving vertical expertise, driving the support behind to the customer from its tracking, reporting kind of mechanism piece, driving customer or selling support, whether that be PowerPoint design, whether that be industry research. So what the customer actually gets is not only that face-to-face relationship with one of our skilled sellers, but it's really a part of an account team. They have a support team that comes along with that.
Got it. So the concept of over-support. Every segment, Steven's got a little nugget. I love that. I mean, that's a best practice. I mean, you're making a strategic bet based on potential to buy, or potential to spend, lifetime value and the opportunity. If someone's spending a nickel and they could spend $1,
right?
And I think I've got the opportunity by deploying more headcount, I should be over allocating. Right. I should be over resourcing instead of peanut butter spreading and going, I've got 1,000 strategic accounts, I've got 1,000 sellers, I'm mapped 1-to-1. Right? I mean, you have to play favorites.
That's right. That's right. And let me just, for the audience, because having done this, it is a challenge.
Yeah.
Again, academically, we can get on the same page really fast.
Yeah.
In actuality, when you're faced with, well, there's cost here, there's a drag, right, on the P&L, and you have multiple functions weighing in on this design and say, that's ludicrous to me to think that. And so you've got to use all the influencing skills that you have, but what I would tell the audience that if you have a clear vision of, as we talked about, the markets, the customers, buyers, how they go to market, that when you business plan this out and pencil this out, it works. So just do the homework up front.
But if you don't have the fact base, and you don't have the segmentation data, then you're just in an anecdotal tomato fight.
And you and I talk about this all the time, right? Coming from a point of view with a fact base, and you can't necessarily, right, do that on your own when you don't have resources. You need help. And to raise your hand, get that external help, whether it be a firm like yours, that's really where money is well spent. And I would use the political capital that you have maybe in your organization. I would use your influence skills to say, listen, I'm going to place a really strong bet that this is where I need to be.
Well, and if you think about the journey, Stephen, many of your peers take when they walk into a new role at a new company, they have a little bit of the, I like to call it, hey, I was hired to fix that, so I got it. And bringing what I perhaps did that made me get the job isn't always what's going to allow you to keep the job and execute on the charter. So for those of you listening in, we're pretty outspoken on this, the concept of the honeymoon period as a new head of sales or a head of marketing, you have somewhere between 6 to 9 months where whatever it is you inherit, it ain't your fault. You're all good. After that, it's your fault. So the bets you make and the chips you play and what you ask for in the interview process that need to be done, you're going to get runway. You got to ask for the right things. Steven's given you a piece of advice, having knocked it off in multiple spots. If you get segmentation wrong, all of the other stuff is going to come falling down. So, very good. So we're going to take another break, and Melissa is going to share with you another resource to continue to help you make your number. Mel V, what do you have in store?
Well, yes, Matt, based on your last point about the honeymoon period, there may be some of you out there who are anticipating or in the midst of a honeymoon period. Steven took the time to come down here to the studio, our briefing center in Dallas, Texas, and had a one-on-one workshop with Matt that was very productive, from what I understand. And we've hosted many sales leaders, sales teams, and other executive teams. So I invite you to come down to the studio, spend time in an interactive workshop with us. If there's one thing we can promise, you will always, well, two things. You'll get the truth, and you'll leave here with clarity. Yes. To get a feel for what's covered in these workshops, go to sbi.tips/2018 workbook.
All right, we're here with Steven Mohan. Steven's the SVP of North American Sales for XPO Logistics, and we are in our final segment. So now we're talking a little bit before the break about the concept of walking in, being new. Some of you are getting the big job for the first time. Some of you are like Steven, you're getting the big job for multiple times because you're really, really good at it. So, Steven, if I think about sort of the situation, the opportunity, and the resolution, if we use that as a framework,
Sure.
You think about your current role, what was the situation, and as you assess things and started to say, I've got 97 things I want to get done, but my bag only holds like 12. So what did you walk into?
Listen, I walked into a great company,
Yep.
growing at an exceptional rate.
Yeah, growing faster than the market.
Faster than the market.
Yep.
And so in many ways, you walked into a head of sales dream.
Yeah, no doubt.
Undoubtedly, like in any organization, you see opportunity and you
Yep.
see opportunity all around you.
Yep.
I'm going to go back to a point that Mel made going into the last break about our workshop.
Yep.
And we had a little workshop beforehand, and I'm making a classic, or was fundamentally beginning to make a classic mistake that you and I kind of helped right-size my thinking on that,
Right.
which is you want to go in because you see a lot of opportunity,
Yeah.
and you want to take it all on, but you simply can't. So
Yeah.
getting really crystal clear is a word that Mel used before
Yep.
at
Clarity.
the break, right? About what really are the big rocks, what are the 2 to 3 to 4, maybe max, movers that you can have impact on and stake your claim there, because using that situation, opportunity, result
Yeah.
type methodology, the situation that I walked into was a great company, a fast-growing company, but a
Yeah.
company that's grown unbelievably fast, so hasn't matured, so to speak,
Yeah.
in regard to kind of selling kind of methodology,
Yeah.
process, or design. There's been a lot of M&A activity that has
Yep.
attributed to the growth. And so there are plenty of things that I want to throw in my bag.
Yep.
And the difficult choice is making that, because inherently when you choose 1, 2, and 3,
Yep.
you look at numbers 4, 5, and 6 and you say you just see how important they are. And it's really difficult for an ambitious
Yeah.
head of sales who goes in and wants to have impact and knows they can
Yeah.
to leave those things idle while you fix the most important. It really is. It's a difficult decision. You're leaving something behind.
Well, and you're being too hard on yourself, because one of the reasons why Steven keeps landing in these roles is because he's really good. I will tell you, as somebody who gets the purview that I get with folks like you and your peers, the 4 no to 1 yes ratio is a piece of advice that I always give to those that are listening. And what I mean by that is there's probably 15 things that you want to do. Mm-hmm. Say no to 4 of them and say yes to 1. Do that 3 times, you've got 3 priorities. And if you start with anything, you start with segmentation for all of the reasons you said in segment 1.
Right.
And it's really, really hard. The second thing is, as a new head of sales,
Mm-hmm.
you're at a speed and an altitude and at a level of clarity. The rest of the organization, because remember, we're in the enterprise, folks. Hundreds, thousands, in Steven's case, are looking, going, ooh, what's the new guy or girl going to do? Where are we going?
That's right.
And what they need is communication, and they need clarity.
That's right.
Everybody is good with going on a ride. They just want to know where they're going.
Yeah.
So, knowing that, we talked about prioritization, and so you aptly described the situation. And you guys have a high-class problem. You're growing faster than the market.
That's right.
You've got good tailwinds. So how have you thought through your prioritization in terms of what we're going to go do now?
Yeah. So come up with a list
Yep.
of really impactful ideas.
Yep.
And that's north of 20,
Yeah.
20 of them, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And then putting the money where my mouth is.
Yep.
And going back to your true north, your center, and say,
Yep.
what is going to be the most impactful
Yep.
piece for this organization to kind of grow and to
Yep.
continue to outpace that of the market and
Yep.
that of our competitors. And the big rocks that we're kind of centralizing around is rethinking our segmentation model.
Yep.
It's probably a bit simplistic today,
Yep.
and it doesn't probably give us the clarity that we need to
Yep.
have the impact with our customers. And then getting down to really understanding our buyers,
Yep.
really thinking about how do we do, whether it's a touch point analysis,
Yep.
whether it's how we go, the methodology, we still have to figure that out.
Yeah.
But that is a big rock that is on the plate that we will do this year
Yep.
to really understand how our customers want to buy.
So if you think about the level of clarity that Steven just spoke with, and the dimensions that I would recommend and what we typically see, you have 3 of them. There's the level of effort to pull something off. there's the probability of success. How successful will my organization be? Stephen's organization has a lot of data, got a really good mature sales operations function. So doing segmentation might be high effort, but probability of success is pretty high because he's got a really capable internal team. And then the last one is size of the prize. If I get segmentation and I know cost to acquire and lifetime value, potential to spend and propensity to buy, what can I do with that? Well, as you know from your success, you have the keys to the kingdom. So now answering hunter, farmer, inside, outside, partners, direct, et cetera, you can go do that, and you can do it with a fact base, with multiple business units, with multiple presidents who have P&Ls who are going, who's this high-flying, perfectly hair sales leader who's running things and disrupting our flow? So that is critical. So Stephen, I guess executing on transformation is never easy. As you look back, and our audience is listening and watching, if you had something that you would say that you did really, really well, and hey, audience, do this, and if you had something where it was, if you were going back and you had a mulligan and you looked at, this was maybe a miss or a blind spot, what would be those two pieces of advice you would give to the team?
Yeah, I think maybe going outside of segmentation, thinking about that, one of the things that I think is critically important is to really get your selling methodology solid. So understanding great selling methodology and understanding that that has to be not just something that you talk about, but ingrained in your tools, ingrained in the skill set of your selling organization. To me, that's how you can scale up and down the kind of the skill piece. So when you think about all the other things that are really important, what kind of training does your sales force need? And thinking about the evolution, I mean, that could be a whole show by itself, like the evolution of sales training and what's really effective and how people learn today. But I think solid selling methodology is something that if you can nail that down and fine tune that and sand that and sand that and sand that and polish it, I think that's really important. And that's something that we've done well that I would say is been a really foundational element of my success over time.
Well, and I've had a bit of a seat for that because of the size and scale of these sales forces. You just putting what I like to call the bumpers on the bowling alley relative to basic sales process, a set of exit criteria, a set of tools, some sort of conversational fluency. The uplift, the A's will do what the A's will do and the C's will not get it done. But how you move the middle, which I think is one of the keys to being a great enterprise leader, is the power in the middle. You get leverage in the middle, and you have gotten leverage by doing that. So then critique yourself. If there was a piece of advice you were giving to those that are listening and saying, hey, if there's maybe one thing I'd do differently, or a piece of advice to somebody who's going into their first transformation, what would that be?
Unfortunately, there are all too many examples that pop in my mind to that piece. I think that the one of the most difficult things and mistakes that you can make, particularly as a sales leader, or really a leader in any function, is a little bit of a lone wolf mentality. And sometimes it's not intentional. In my case, and I've stubbed my toe here, it was never intentional. It was never intentional but it was, I'm trying to learn this really fast. I don't want to, I'm not trying to expose that I don't quite understand this yet, so let me study this out. And then you want to do this, so let me have the impact that I desire. I know this, I'm in this honeymoon period, but I know that's coming to an end, so I really want to start putting my name on some things, and so I can have that level of impact. And so you start walking down this path. I would say bring your team along with you from the very first step. And as I've reassessed where I've stubbed my toe, I look back and I think I was just trying to put my head down. I was trying to get stuff done, and I didn't bring my team along with me. Like the classic leadership line is like, if you're a great leader, make sure when you look over your shoulder, your team's still behind you. And I think that would be a piece of advice. If you're in your first transformation, there's a level of ambition. Typically, there's a level of anxiety about the success of it,
and you want to have the answer. So you don't want to show vulnerability and say, I don't know.
So you work your tail off to go kind of find those answers and make sure you can line them up. So listen, I have the answers to all the problems. So when put on the spot, and the new person, guy, girl, is put on the spot, you have the answers. And what you realize is the last 3 months I've been doing this, on my own not influencing the organization to come along with me, because I will tell you, just like any function, sales, it is inextricably linked to almost every function, all the way through, finance, ops, human resources. And if you don't bring your peer group along with you and constantly articulating what you're trying to accomplish with them in early days, you'll stub your toe.
Wow. So great feedback, great transparency from Stephen. For those of you listening and viewing, this is a guy that if I was somebody going on a transformation, I would pick up the phone and call him and get his advice. If I was somebody wanting to be part of a winning team and work for somebody who knows what they're doing, the guy is a superstar. So, Stephen, can't thank you enough for coming by, seeing you in person. So, Melissa, I think you've got one more goodie for the audience before we wrap up today.
Yes, I do. Very well said, Steve. And if I had a goodie for you, if this were Jimmy Fallon or Ellen, which we're not there yet,
yes.
I would have a T-shirt for you that says, I woke up like this. So, not yet. Nice. We're almost there.
Touche, touche.
For those of you in our audience listening and watching, we feature about 100 executives per year on the SBI podcast, and we know a lot of fantastic people like Stephen, but we don't know everyone. So if you have a compelling story to share, please reach out to me, Melissa Valdez on LinkedIn. That's probably the easiest way to get in touch with me, or you can visit our website at salesbenchmarkindex.com.
All right, everybody, that's it for today. As always, you have a choice on where you put your ears and your eyes. So I appreciate, and I know Melissa does, and the rest of the SBI community, that you tuned in with us. Big thank you to Stephen for coming to spend time with us.
Thank you.
And as always, I wish you good luck as you try and make your number.
This has been the SBI Podcast. For more information on the studio, SBI's Executive Briefing Center, our team, or to schedule a workshop, please visit salesbenchmarkindex.com.